Hi, this is Rachel Lopez, Associate Editor at the Hindustan Times. It seems everyone's into podcasts these days, isn't it? They're talking about them, they're listening to them, they're kind of swapping recommendations on what to listen to and what not to listen to. They're even recording their own. If you haven't started yet, if you haven't really got onto the bandwagon, we're here to help. We'll tell you how to get started, how to listen to them, how to really get hooked onto what everyone's talking about, and we've got lots of tips and tricks on how to pick the best ones. A lot of people come up to me and say, I've never listened to a podcast, what should I start with before? And to them, I say, never ever go onto the internet, find a list of best podcasts or top 10 or 25 or whatever podcasts and pick something from there. I think you'll just be disappointed with the best of the best if you're a beginner, because you'll just be picking what other people like. You'll be picking an established show that isn't really geared to a first-time listener. And you'll end up thinking all podcasts suck, and that'll be kind of the end of it. My better trick is to look at a subject that already appeals to you. If you're interested in finance, if you're interested in crime, if something that is already in your wheelhouse, you're more likely to be interested in an audio show about it. And it'll help you attune yourself to listening to an audio show and get on to a completely different genre later on. In my case, I'm a huge TV nut. I'm streaming stuff all the time. So it's quite natural that two of my favorite podcasts are actually companion audio shows to existing TV shows. One of them is the companion podcast to Chernobyl, which is the HBO show about, it's a brilliant show, about the nuclear disaster in what is present-day Ukraine. And there are 5 television episodes and 5 companion audio shows. They're essentially interviews with Craig Mazin, the show's creator, with someone who's asking him questions. And this is where I think the audio format works so nicely, because Craig Mazin essentially creates in your head a completely different program from what you've just seen on screen. He explains why he chose certain scenes, he explains why he chose certain lines, and he retained certain dialogues that he had already, that were already part of the public domain, that were already actually reported. So he'll tell you essentially where he's drawn the line between fact and fiction. And it's a whole other way to enjoy something you have already enjoyed, and sneakily then to enjoy podcasts as well. So the Chernobyl podcast is one recommendation. My other recommendation for television-based audio programming is the Office Girls podcast. I am a huge Office nut as well. I have been watching the show over and over. I'm not going to tell you who my favorite character is. It's all of them, but it's really Dwight. But the Office Girls podcast is this fun behind the scenes look after all these years. So it's a lot of nostalgia as well. And it's hosted by the women who played Pam and Angela. So Pam and Angela essentially take you behind the scenes of the office filming, of just the gang getting together, of how certain scenes went down, and how much fun they had. Another subject that actually doesn't appear on any top 10 lists on the internet, but it's a subject that appeals to me, is history. I'm a huge history nut. I'm interested in stuff that happened a long time ago. I'm interested in stuff that happened yesterday. I'm very keen to know how it all fits together. And for history buffs, I can think of no better podcast than the BBC's In Our Time podcast. Okay, so it started off as a radio show. It's a long-running podcast. It's been on for, I think, more than a decade. And the BBC has very generously put up all their back episodes online and recut them as podcasts. It's essentially one man, Melvin Bragg, shout out to Melvin, who ends up having a different themed show every episode. And they talk about Constantine, they talk about the number 0, they talk about Antarctica, they talk about literature, they talk about all kinds of historical subjects every episode, and they bring in 3 or 4 speakers who are essentially experts in their field to discuss what we know, what we don't know, and why we know what we know on that particular subject. So that's just one episode. The 0 episode explains not just everything we know, which is the Aryabhat, etc., but how it got on, how the Arabic numeral system came into use in the larger world, and how much it helped, how it didn't help, what it kind of did for mathematics and therefore for business. And it's just such a beautiful way of understanding history. If you didn't learn any at school, if you think history is boring, you will change your mind with the In Our Time podcast. And one thing about the BBC podcast is that everything is in a clipped British accent. Everything is delivered, all the all this, all the conversation is being done by academics who are used to giving lectures in the first place. So no one is hemming and hawing, no one is wasting any time. Everyone's prepared with their answers, and they're damn good answers. So the BBC In Our Time podcast, chef's kiss. If you're a foodie, and who isn't, there is no better way to get into podcasts than to listen to Gastropod. Gastropod is another one of those long-running shows, so there are a ton of episodes. You can jump into any which one you want. Each of them fixes in on one subject every time. So they've looked at citruses and how they've evolved over the years. They've looked at chocolate, they've looked at ice, they've looked at gene splicing and what your food might look like in the future. They've looked at extinct foods. And each episode essentially looks at the science, the technology, the history, and how each food kind of shapes the economy of the areas that it is in, and how it shapes you and me today. Beautiful delivery, solid research, and really lovely episodes in which you're not really, tasting the food and saying, wonderful, this is my grandmother's recipe, what have you. They're really looking at how to appreciate food on a whole other intellectual level. And if you're a foodie, you're going to use your heart and your head. Gastropod is a great, great way to start. Give yourself a little time with audio formats if you're not used to them. Don't sort of expect to sit in one place for 40 minutes and sort of say, I'm listening to a podcast, I can't do anything else. If you're not used to it, it's going to take a little while. A lot of podcast formats allow you to speed up. So if people are talking slowly and you just don't have the patience, you can speed up the speed at which they speak. That's really helpful for a lot of people, or slow it down if you haven't really caught it. A lot of formats also allow you, I know the Apple one does, that allow you to skip forward 15 seconds. So if someone's droning on, as I can often, they can just kind of skip to the next thought or to the next idea. You needn't finish an entire podcast if you don't like it, just jump on to something else. But keep it on and keep listening, and sometimes just a half-remembered, half-heard thing can help you and can change you in ways that maybe you really didn't expect. So give podcasts a try, they're great fun.